30 countries are lining up to join an alliance that could end America's dominance over the global economy. No tanks, no missiles. Just currency, trade routes, and a plan decades in the making. And the West? They didn't see it coming. This isn't speculation. This is already happening. While most of us scroll through headlines about inflation, political scandals, or celebrity drama, something far bigger is unfolding behind closed doors. A quiet revolution. One that doesn't need violence or propaganda. It's being built with infrastructure deals, currency swaps, and diplomatic handshakes in places most people can't even find on a map. It's called BRICS, and if you haven't been paying attention, now's the time to start. Because what began as a modest economic club in 2009 has evolved into something much more powerful. Something that could fundamentally reshape how money moves, how nations trade, and who holds the keys to global power in the next 50 years. More than 30 nations have expressed serious interest in joining. Over 20 have formally applied. And the ones being considered? They're not random. They're strategic, geographically critical, economically significant, and increasingly frustrated with a system they believe no longer serves them. So let's talk about what BRICS really is, why it's growing so fast, and what it could mean for the world you and I live in. BRICS stands for 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These nations came together in 2009 with one shared frustration. They were tired of being told what to do by the West. For decades, institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank had dominated global finance. If you needed a loan, you went to them. If you wanted development funding, you played by their rules. And those rules often came with strings attached: political reforms, economic restructures, trade concessions. For countries trying to grow, it felt less like partnership and more like control. So these 5 nations decided to create an alternative, not to destroy the existing system overnight, but to build something parallel, something that gave them more say, more independence, more room to breathe. At first, the world didn't take it seriously. Analysts called it symbolic, a talking shop, a photo opportunity for leaders who wanted to look important but lacked real clout. They were wrong. Over the years, BRICS quietly built infrastructure. It launched the New Development Bank in 2015, offering loans in local currencies instead of forcing countries to borrow in US dollars. It started coordinating on trade, on energy, on technology, and slowly it started to matter. Then came 2024. That's when everything changed. BRICS expanded. Egypt joined. So did Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia. Suddenly, this wasn't just a club of 5 anymore. It was 10. And those 10 countries represented over 40% of the world's population and more than a quarter of global GDP. That's not a sideshow. That's a superpower in the making. Here's the part that should make you sit up and pay attention. More than 30 countries have now signaled they want in. Some have already submitted formal applications. And the list reads like a geopolitical chessboard. Bahrain, Malaysia, Turkey, Vietnam, Belarus, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Kuwait, Thailand, Uzbekistan. These aren't desperate nations with nothing to lose. Many of them are thriving economies, strategic players, countries with resources, infrastructure, and influence. So why are they knocking on BRICS' door? The answer is simple. They want options. For too long, the global economy has run on one currency, the US dollar. If you wanted to buy oil, you paid in dollars. If you wanted to trade internationally, you needed dollars. And that gave Washington enormous power. Not just economic power, but political leverage. Think about it. If your country's economy depends on access to dollars, and the US controls the flow of dollars, then the US controls you. Sanctions become weapons, trade restrictions become punishments. And your sovereignty? It's negotiable. Many nations are exhausted by this dynamic. They've watched as Western countries imposed sanctions on Russia, froze assets, and cut off access to the SWIFT banking system. And they've thought to themselves, what if we're next? BRICS offers an escape hatch, a system where trade happens in local currencies, where loans don't come with political conditions, where infrastructure deals are negotiated between equals, not dictated by distant bureaucrats. It's not about ideology. It's about autonomy. Let's zoom in on some of the countries being considered, because their inclusion isn't random. Each one brings something specific to the table. The Gulf states, Bahrain and Kuwait, small in size, massive in influence. These nations sit on some of the world's richest oil and gas reserves. For decades, they've aligned with the West, particularly the United States. But now, they're hedging their bets. Why? Because they see the future, and it's tilting east. China is the world's largest importer of oil. India's demand is skyrocketing, and both are BRICS members. If Bahrain and Kuwait join, along with existing members Iran and the UAE, BRICS would control a staggering portion of global energy supply. That's not just economic power, that's the ability to influence prices, stabilize markets, and leverage energy as a diplomatic tool. Mexico, the North American wild card. This one's a big deal. Mexico has an economy worth over $1.5 trillion. It's the United States' second-largest trading partner, and it shares a 2,000-mile border with the world's largest economy. If Mexico joins BRICS, it would be a seismic shift. It would mean that a country deeply integrated into U.S. supply chains is also part of an alliance designed to reduce American dominance. That's not just a crack in the foundation, it's a statement. Mexico would bring ports, manufacturing hubs, and direct access to North American markets. For BRICS, that's invaluable. Belarus, Europe's backdoor. Belarus doesn't get much attention, but it should. Positioned between Russia and the European Union, it's a geographic bridge, a landlocked corridor that connects east and west. As tensions between Russia and NATO continue to simmer, Belarus becomes even more critical. If it formally joins BRICS, the alliance gains a foothold in Europe, a region traditionally dominated by Western institutions, Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam. These countries are manufacturing powerhouses. Electronics, automobiles, textiles, you name it, they produce it. They're also navigating a tricky balancing act between the US and China, trying not to anger either side. BRICS gives them a third option, a coalition where they don't have to choose. They can trade with China, cooperate with India, and maintain ties with the West, all without picking a side. Vietnam in particular is interesting. Its economy is booming, exports are surging, and it's quietly diversifying its partnerships. Joining BRICS would signal that it's no longer content being a pawn in someone else's game. Central Asia, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan might not be a household name, but it's strategically vital. It sits at the crossroads of China, Russia, South Asia, and the Middle East. It has natural resources. And it's part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project designed to connect Asia with Europe. For BRICS, Uzbekistan is a puzzle piece. It helps link the alliance's Asian and Middle Eastern wings, creating a contiguous zone of influence that spans continents. Sri Lanka, the Indian Ocean Gateway. Sri Lanka is small, it's also recovering from a severe economic crisis. But location matters, and Sri Lanka is located along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. China has already invested heavily in Sri Lankan ports. India watches nervously, knowing that whoever controls those ports controls access to the Indian Ocean. For BRICS, Sri Lanka isn't just a country, it's a choke point. Now let's talk about money, because that's where the real revolution is happening. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. If you wanted to do business internationally, you needed dollars. That gave the United States extraordinary power, economic, political, and military. But BRICS is changing that. Nearly half of all trade within BRICS is now settled in Chinese yuan, not dollars. Yuan. That's a massive shift, and it's accelerating. The new development bank, BRICS' answer to the World Bank, now issues loans in local currencies. Countries can borrow money without needing dollar reserves, without exposing themselves to currency fluctuations, without giving Washington a veto over their economic future. And there's more. BRICS is developing a digital settlement system, blockchain-based, secure, and completely independent of Western financial infrastructure. If this system goes live, it could bypass SWIFT, the messaging network that underpins global banking. Imagine a world where countries can trade, lend, and invest without ever touching the dollar. That's not science fiction. That's the blueprint BRICS is building right now. Then came Donald Trump. In January 2025, Trump returned to the White House. And within weeks, he rolled out a sweeping tariff regime. 50% on Chinese electric vehicles, 25% on semiconductors, 40% on steel and aluminum, 30% on pharmaceuticals from India and Brazil. The message was clear. America first. Again. But here's the thing. Tariffs don't just hurt the countries being targeted. They also push those countries to find alternatives. India called the tariffs short-sighted. China labeled them economic aggression. South Africa rejected what it called outdated rules. And quietly, behind the scenes, countries started looking elsewhere. Mexico, Thailand, Malaysia, even longtime U.S. partners began exploring their options. And BRICS was waiting with open arms. In trying to strong-arm the world, Trump may have accelerated the very shift he wanted to prevent. Because when you corner countries, they don't surrender. They find new allies. So where does this leave us? If BRICS successfully integrates even half of the countries currently being considered, it will become one of the most powerful alliances in modern history. Spanning Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, it would rival, or even surpass, the economic output of the G7. That doesn't mean the end of American power, but it does mean the end of unchallenged American dominance. The world is moving toward multipolarity, not one superpower, but several centers of influence. And BRICS is positioning itself to be one of those centers. For countries on the fence, the calculus is changing. Joining BRICS no longer looks risky. It looks pragmatic. A way to diversify partnerships, reduce dependence on the West, and gain a voice in shaping the future. This is the story you're not hearing enough about. While the media fixates on elections, scandals, and culture wars, a tectonic shift is happening in global power. BRICS isn't just an economic club anymore. It's a movement. A signal that the world order established after World War II is no longer set in stone. That new rules are being written. And that the countries doing the writing are no longer willing to wait for permission. 30 nations are watching. 20 have applied. And the ones who join will help decide what the next century looks like. So here's the question. Is BRICS the future, or is it a risky bet that will crumble under its own contradictions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the stories shaping our world, hit subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. The old world is fading. A new one is being built. And whether you're ready or not, the change is already here. See you in the next one.